point number two has to do with ideology. The American ideology is such that private property, as we all know, is this sacred stuff, right? We've got books back here on the wall condemning that notion, and every anarchist and socialist, communist thinker, right, begins with the dangers of private property when they think about what is wrong with the capitalist world. But the reality is, again, out there in the American populace, private property is sacred stuff. And you, regardless of whether it is your own or anyone else's, folks feel that if someone has come for anyone's private property, theirs is on the line. I think that's a big part of what's going on, again, with the American ideology, this belief system that people act upon.
Yeah, private property is very sacred in American society. I couldn't disagree with that anymore. The main thing I have to think about that is that is really wrong. The concept of private property on this continent in particular has a big historical context where this conquering colonialist society came in and imposed this idea of private property on the peoples that were living here. And, you know, I'd like to see it go away. I feel pretty safe saying that people involved in radical movements, especially the Earth Liberation Front, were and are working towards eliminating those kinds of ideas in our society. So yes, it's going to turn people off if we attack their private property. I dealt with that personally on many occasions. There was a tree farm that got burnt down in Oregon. That was a poplar farm. It was an action of the Earth Liberation Front, and I met face to face with people who worked there and had to lose some time at work because the building had to be remade. When the Cavell West horse slaughterhouse was burnt down, that was slaughtering wild horses on public lands and selling the horse meat overseas. When the underground burned that down, I got a phone call from the owner of the company screaming at me at my house about how I burnt down when I didn't set the fire, but he was just saying I did anyway. But you know, I'm familiar with the concept of people being frustrated and angered and feeling like we did something that was really horrible when property was destroyed. I think that's kind of by design, right? You're choosing to destroy property at this point or at any given point in the movement rather than doing something that's physically violent towards somebody as an individual. Property shouldn't be perceived as sacred, and in countries, even first world countries outside of the US, there's slightly different perceptions of property. You look at protests throughout Europe, and there's consistent property destruction of them decade after decade after decade. In the United States, we see it once in a while, and the anarchists are always pinned up as the horrible people who break windows, but you know, almost every major protest in Europe has got property destruction, and I would like to see this sacred nature of property dismantled, and I think that's part of the bigger objective that these underground groups are trying to create.